And we're live. Welcome to Set Impact, where we discuss how emerging technology is changing sectors, society, and the world at large. For a period of about 6 weeks, I'll be speaking to founders and also company representatives, solving some of the hardest and most interesting problems over LinkedIn Live. Today, we have Jakov. Am I pronouncing that right? Jakov.
Yes, it's Jakov, yeah.
Jakov, the communication manager of COBOD International. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I really appreciate you jumping on. I mean, 3D printed buildings is something that has been so fascinating for me, and it was a technology that I kind of came across about 2 years ago, but I just ignored it. You know, it was like flying cars. I mean, it was too sci-fi for me, and I didn't quite believe that it was possible until I came across a few companies like yours. So, I mean, could you tell me a little bit more about COBOD and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, it's so it started 2013, and here in Denmark is a 3D printing company actually that just does conventional 3D printing. But after a while, they saw the potential of construction printing, and the CEO with some of my colleagues went around the globe, visited 38 different projects in all possible continents, in America, in Asia, Europe, and Arabia, and yeah, so where the state of the industry and the technology is, what the challenges of it are, and what can be done from it. And from these experiences, the first version, the BOD 1, was developed, and yeah, since then we were just keeping it like that. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, could you talk about? I mean, before we jumped on live, I mean, you talked about the printers being somewhat agnostic. So just you guys being able to adapt the use case to the printer. I mean, could you talk a little bit more about that and kind of highlight some of the things that your clients have built with your printers?
Yeah, so that's a question we always get, like if the printer is it allowed to do this? Is it allowed to do that? The printer is just a tool, so you can just adapt it to the building regulations of the region where you're at. So it doesn't really care. And yeah, our clients did many different things. There's in Belgium, Camp C built a 2-story home, and these days you can visit it. There's a showcase for 3CP technology, and yeah, also some companies construct concrete prefabs that you can assemble then on site, and the possibilities are pretty much endless. You just have to adapt it to the situation where you're at. And of course, we always give advice to our customers, and we always work with them to make sure they have the best solution for their projects.
And I mean, it's a pretty obvious question, but I mean, who typically are your clients? So I mean, from my limited understanding, COBOD is a company that builds and manufactures 3D printers
Exactly.
for the construction sector. But could you kind of highlight you know, who your clients are? I mean, maybe not who, but like the type of industry that they're in.
Yeah. So it's yeah, COBOD is a technology company. We just produce the printers, and we always work on new models. But our customers are global companies all over the world that just realize the potential of the product and the 3DCP industry as a whole and the disruptiveness of it. So it's construction companies. It's also research projects, universities, and yeah, many different. There's also concrete manufacturers and stuff like that, where they want to have the solutions of the future right now.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the, I mean, when you sell your technology to your particular clients, I mean, you guys show what's possible. I mean, before we went live, you kind of showed you showed like a model of the house that you guys.
Yeah, this is the BOD 2, we call it. It was printed with a BOD.
Okay.
And it's a 1-story house here in Copenhagen. really close to our offices, and we use it as a showroom to what's possible with the technology.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and yeah, it's completely built based on adhering to the EU and Danish building regulations, which are pretty strict, of course.
Mm.
And just also people when ask what is possible, what are we allowed to do? We're pretty much allowed to do whatever you like as long as you adhere to the codes. And yeah, it's also possible to build homes. It's possible to build industrial buildings. It's possible to build towers for windmills even. So it's I still get mind blown of what my colleagues can come up with.
Yeah, from a pricing perspective, I mean, do you guys have any like data in terms of how much it would cost to build like a one-story house like that?
Well, that depends very much on where you're at, because prices aren't standardized. Depends on what the material prices are usually in your region, the price of the workforce and stuff like that. So we can't really give an exact price. It depends. We always do it case by case, depending of where the customer comes from.
Is there a range for a house like that though?
I don't really know. No.
You don't know? No, that's fine. It's fine.
Sorry.
I mean, the construction industry is kind of, I mean, I think one of the stats that I read before coming on live was the construction industry loses out on like over $1.6 trillion annually because of inefficiency. And that in part, I mean, has kind of drove up like, you know, it's kind of drove up a housing affordability crisis especially in areas in America, and I would kind of argue here in London as well. I mean, what's amazing about 3D printing and what gets me so fascinated is you only need to print and produce the material that you need, because essentially you're just printing for example, the 3D printing houses, you're only printing the house and you're only using the cement that you actually need. So there's very, very minimal waste. I mean, is your material and the printing process proprietary to you guys? And I mean, I'm certain you're not buying the material off the shelf, right? I mean, this is something that's something that you guys have built and produced in-house, right?
Not exactly. We have our in-house solutions that we use in testing and in research, but actually you just use your local materials that you can get. It's any old concrete, and yeah. So you just add a certain additives. We of course help always our customers with finding the best recipe, so to speak, for their projects and for the region where they're at. But it's usually just locally sourced material that you usually use for the construction in the area. So that's also helps driving the costs down of the projects, because you don't have to import anything from Denmark or stuff like that. You just go to your local cement factory and get what you need.
I mean, what's the approach to insulating closures, and what are like the thermal properties of the 3D printed structures themselves? I mean, from when I was watching videos of 3D printed structures, they weren't like, you know, when you guys were when these properties were being built, they weren't like brick walls. They were printed, and almost they were like
it's a layer that just goes through. Yeah. So it has the usual insulating properties of concrete and mortar, but we always propose to our customers to print a double wall with a cavity in between, and then you can insulate the cavity inside with whatever you need, and also use it for piping and for electricity and stuff like that. So it's always like this. One layer goes and then the other, and then in between you can fill it with whatever you need, which we use, for example, for the bot that I showed you in Denmark. The regulations are quite strict to make the new buildings as least of a carbon footprint as they can have. And we still passed all the regulations. We didn't have any problems with the authority regarding that. And it's and the same goes for the project in Belgium. They also used.
Could you highlight what your project is in Belgium? Sorry.
It's a project from CAMC. It's not ours. They just bought our printer that they're using, so they have more information on that than I do. I just know that they also adhere to all the codes that need to be done based on the EU building codes, and they're also going to experiment with implementing solar panels and stuff like that to pretty much make a self-sufficient house.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I mean, does your technology and I mean, would your technology, not your technology, but like the 3D printed structures, would they have to sit on regular foundation, or does the foundation have to be proprietary or have certain specifics to be able to accommodate 3D printed houses?
Yeah, it's right as of now, the technology is limited in making foundations, so you have to do the foundations in a conventional way.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, you print the house, the structure that you need. But for the board, we did, as you can see, the shape of it.
Mm-hmm.
We had the idea. We printed the shape that the house needed to be, and
Mm-hmm.
then we cast the what's the word? We cast the foundations into that shape that was pre-printed. So that was like a new experimental solution that we tried out, and it actually worked so far. But usually our customers need to make the foundations beforehand, and then you just print on top of that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what does regulation look like in, say, 3D printed buildings? I mean, what do you guys need to prove, and how does this regulation differ across different jurisdictions? Yeah.
That's the thing. That there is no special regulation regarding 3D printed houses, because it's still, first of all, it's pretty new, and it doesn't change the end product, the house. It's just the way of how you build the house. So as long as you adhere to the local regulations, you just adjust printer to that, your design, actually, like we did here with the double walls, and then we put in the insulation that was needed for the Danish building codes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that we adjusted the process of designing the house to, and instructing the printer to actually pull that off.
Okay. And does the regulation more come around the way it's built? I mean,
not really. No, it's actually to, as far as I know, it's just to fulfill the later requirements. Of course, there's still the safety regulations. The technicians and people working around the printer still need to have all the safety equipment and stuff like that during the process of building. But there's no thing that regulates how a printer is supposed to print right now.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, in terms of the 3D printed, in terms of 3D printing in the construction sector. So, for example, if you're printing a batch of houses, right? What dangerous aspects of the construction sector do you think in the future? Do you think the 3D printing economy can kind of automate out of the ecosystem? And like, what's the labor force differential in the 3D printed structure in the 3D printed world compared to what it is right now? I mean, I'm certain this is going to have an effect on jobs. I mean, there's no doubt. But and so, like, what types of jobs do you think are going to be automated out as a sector, and what new jobs do you think will kind of come into play as the 3D printing economy grows, I guess?
Yeah, so from the current construction that we take out is like carrying of materials and stuff upstairs or around the construction yard, like, for example, there's no use of ladders or scaffolding or stuff like that. So that's a so-called dangerous aspect that we kind of phase out with our technology. But when it comes to the workforce, it's cutting down on how many people we actually need to build a house. Our printer can be operated with just 2 people, and that's it. You just need 2 people on your construction site, and it's going to need a bit more qualified workforce. So usually it's engineers or people with IT backgrounds, and because most of the work you actually do is watching out on laptop that's connected to the printer, that the print is going smoothly, and adjust the flow of the material and stuff like that. And one person just to keep track of the print head, if everything's going smoothly, keep stuff out of the way. Of course, in practice, there's usually a bit more people, but it cuts down on the workforce. So dramatically, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, and so the jobs that would be kind of automated out of the ecosystem, assuming 3D printing becomes a thing and becomes a normal way of doing what, a normal way of building structures, it will be the labor work, right? So carrying bricks, yes. Mixing cement by hand, which shouldn't
exactly.
Be. I think I used to do that as a young kid.
Yeah, me as well.
And so, but that it seems somewhat obvious that those roles would be automated out of the ecosystem. But what's really interesting to me is the role of the quantity surveyor or the civil engineer, the architect. How do them roles, evolve? Because I can't imagine the need for a quantity surveyor to work on your types of projects, because I mean, it will be automated, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think architects would be liberated without technology. They will, because their designs would actually come to the forefront, and they could also design more freely, because the way that the print head moves allows certain shapes and designs that conventional building wouldn't, with concrete at least, wouldn't allow as of yet. And because their designs would dictate the process of how the printer would approach and pull off the project. So an architect would actually be a much bigger factor on a construction yard, for example. And yeah, and as the printer will be able to do more and more, the designs will also come to the forefront, and what the architect thinks of will dictate of how the work will look on the project. So I think they would actually be liberated in a way. They would actually be allowed to play more with the designs, and there will also be a big authority on the construction work. Everybody would look to them, and so
yeah. I mean, as much as architecture is a science, I mean, it's also very creative as well, right? So yeah, I think play and liberation are the right words to describe that type of role. I mean, what about the role of a civil engineer?
To be honest, I don't really didn't really think about that. Yeah, so.
It's a fascinating thing. I mean, I mean, and at best we're just guessing, right? I mean,
of course,
none of this is in stone. I mean, in terms of in terms of your business model itself, I mean, could you kind of highlight, how you guys make money, who you guys are serving, yeah, and also highlight some of the stuff some of the exciting work that your the users of your printers are doing.
Yeah, so as companies globally that see the potential of our product and the industry as a whole, and how much it's going to be disruptive to the conventional construction industry. So so far we had like huge partners like GE or Lafarge, like those big global companies with thousands of employees, and they pursue the future. They want to be future safe, so to speak. And with them, we do many different projects. With GE, we building towers for windmills, and it's a very exciting project that's still going to continue, and we're going to refine the process, and also precast plants that they can print concrete elements that they can transport to a site, or they can print them on site as well and then incorporate them into a structure. We also have real estate developers, because they like the speed of the printer is very beneficial to them. Then you can pretty much design a whole neighborhood and just let the printer do its work 24/7. And a lot of research institutions and universities also buy our printers, and they also experiment with some new solutions and future solutions. And we work closely with all of them, and we always try to be very open about the process of it, what the limitations currently are, and how to optimize the material. And sometimes if a design has some special requirements, we have an in-house team of architects, engineers, IT specialists. Everybody's helping with those projects all the time. So yeah, what's been done, I mentioned the tower, but that's still in an experimental phase. There's Camp C in Belgium that built a 2-story home. And we have also some customers in the Middle East that are building some interesting projects with, but we're not allowed to go public with it yet. Yeah.
Fair enough. I mean, COBOD going forward, what can we expect from COBOD in an uber optimistic world 24 months from now? What do you think COBOD can achieve, and in terms of this technology and the printing solutions it can provide its clients, which I'm going to assume are like construction companies and people and businesses that are building structures?
Well, in an optimistic, like in an ideal scenario in the future, we would make a model of a printer, which would be actually more of a construction robot, because it would do everything. So we could actually pull off a first building that's been completely printed from so literally the whole building, not just printing the walls like we do right now, but preparing the foundation, painting the walls, insulating the building, laying down pipes and electricity lines and plastering, everything. So like you just press start and the printer does the rest, or
the robot.
I would even say construction robot. Yeah. And in regards to that, yeah, we are actually working with some huge architectural companies. I don't know if you heard about Big here in Copenhagen and Henrik Larsen, but they are actually working on designs together with us. They're working on designs. We are working on the machine to pull off those designs, and there would be a project in the future to actually pull off that house.
That's amazing. I mean, I really appreciate this. I mean, we've got some questions in the chat. So are you okay to go ahead with it? So 1 second, we'll go with Frankie Howland. She asked, fascinating, what changes do you anticipate seeing to the industry over the next few years or so? I think we've kind of highlighted that, but if you could kind of answer that.
Just to reiterate, it's going to cut down on the labor workforce drastically. It's going to change how architects think about their buildings, and real estate developers how they plan whole neighborhoods and communities. And it's going to cut down the costs, cut down on the labor, and cut down on the time it needs to pull off the projects to completion.
I mean, for example, like a real estate company that wants to build almost like a village, or like have bought a piece of land and are now looking to renovate it by building a lot of houses. I mean, the time differential is likely to be massive, but also the labor differential, right? Because essentially the foundations need to be dug out, but then the printer can just move.
Exactly.
Print and move.
Our design, the way our printer is designed, it has a certain width, but in length, technically, you could do it really, really long. You just add more modules, and then the printer just rides along them. So you could actually print 3 or 4 houses, one next to another, of a certain width. And then the printer just does one layer and comes back and does the other one, and just you can. That's all in theory right now. Of course, we haven't pulled that something like that off, but that's the potential of the technology, where you can actually, in a matter of weeks, maybe have 4 complete houses printed.
Okay, so I mean, you said a matter of weeks. I mean, if you read technology magazines, they say, oh, we can get all of this done in a day. That kind of highlights some of the limitations, of 3D printing right now. I mean, off the top of your head, what are some of the limitations in the 3D printing world and 3D printing structures generally?
Yeah, well, for now it's just walls, for example, just lines of concrete. We cannot print foundations. You can't print insulation right now, and also when it comes to going in height, there's also a certain limitation. The people in Belgium made a 2-story home, but when they printed the first story, the ground floor, they did the foundations for the second floor conventionally, and then on top of that, the printer continued printing. So there are certain limitations that the technology still has. So people need to be realistic, and we're also very open about what is actually possible with the state of 3D CP right now. And we have a white paper that we give away freely. You can download it from our website, where we go in details of what claims are pretty much science fiction, other claims are possible in the near future, and certain claims are, of course, very much true for the state of industry right now.
The double storage house seems very interesting to me, because obviously I can somewhat imagine being able to print a bungalow, but being able to print a double storage house must involve so much more complexity, because you've got steel beams, you've got foundation, you've got structure, and yeah, being able to, you would have to kind of have a robot that can actually do that for you, and a pretty heavy duty one, because I've been involved in working on extensions before. These steel beams aren't light at all.
Yeah, that's quite tricky, and that is definitely currently a limitation, but something that, if could be pulled off in the future, then regarding this question, that would also really disrupt the industry. Once there's a solution found for something like that, I think it would be very disruptive for the industry.
Yeah, because then it kind of opens up doors for maybe storage flats as well later on.
Exactly, and also driving down the costs as well, keeping them. You can also experiment with materials and keeping them as green as you can, and make low cost, green, affordable housing. It is currently in the future, but it's a future that's actually reachable. I think it's realistic. We'll be at that point.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? One of the things that kind of fascinates me about 3D printing structures is, I mean, whilst it has a massive economic benefit for the company that's producing it, because it adds so much value and so much efficiency, I mean, it's the social concept, it's the social element that kind of fascinates me, because, I mean, if you can democratize access to home ownership, you can pretty much rewire a complete society, because if you can democratize access to home ownership, the bottom floor of society comes up a bit, and then you reduce crimes across the board and things like that. So I mean, I think one main problem in London we have here is houses are just too expensive, just way too expensive. $500,000 for a 3-bedroom semi-detached house. I mean, it's beyond ridiculous now. So if you look at wages, they haven't come up for the last 10 years. So the social element, whilst it's while it's somewhat distant, because obviously the technology needs to evolve, but over the next, say, 25 years, I mean, you can bring up the social floor of society by democratizing access to home ownership, and provide a much more prosperous society, because I think home ownership really allows people to have whilst you can't provide equality across the board, you can ensure that everyone has a safe home and a warm roof to live in.
To have a more equal starting point for everybody.
Exactly. I mean, as we wrap up towards the end of the interview, I really appreciate Frankie for asking that question. Thank you so much. I mean, is there anything you kind of want to shout out? Are you guys hiring? Are you guys fundraising? Are you are there any new projects on the horizon right now that you're not allowed to talk to, but you'd still like to reveal over the live?
There's a lot of them I'm not allowed to mention, unfortunately. I mentioned to you already, I get still mind blown every time I walk into a meeting between R&D and the rest of the tech staff, and when I see what they're working on, I'm just but that stuff, I think they would be mad at me if I told stuff like that. And yeah, like I mentioned, the project of keep an eye out for COBOD, for the project of the first completely printed house. And our close partnership with GE is still a thing. And in the future, we're gonna build more of those towers, and which will also help to drive down electric power costs and make it more affordable, and to print more of the windmills all across the globe.
Well, that's amazing. I really appreciate you jumping on this morning. So yeah,
thanks for having us and giving us the opportunity to promote us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was our pleasure. So where can people find you guys? Where can people find the white paper, etc.?
It's cobod.com, so COBOD.com. And there you have, of course, a brochure. You have the white paper on the I don't know exactly which tab it is on the website, which is a bit embarrassing because it's my job to know that. But yeah, you can find all the white paper there. You can find the contact information if you want to reach out to me. And yeah, I hope you visit the website. There's a lot of more.
Amazing. I really appreciate you jumping on this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us. Bye.